Welcome back to Radioactive on 90.9 FM KRCL. I'm Billy Palmer in the studio with
Laura Jones.
Now we are now we are going to get into a conversation we had last Sunday with presenters with the upcoming Body and Earth conference taking place in Minnesota. We start with Dr. Ruby Gibson. She starts with the definition of somatic archaeology.
Somatic archaeology and the concept of that as a modality, because I've primarily been a counselor for most of my professional career, is that our body retains information, and we retain information for generations. So historical trauma, relates to the accumulation of information that our ancestors experienced that goes unprocessed, that it keeps getting passed on to the next generations as a way of helping them survive, and as a way of passing on knowledge, and as a way of not forgetting. And so somatic archaeology is a technique that allows us to access that information in our body, to uproot it so that we don't have to keep repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Because what we're seeing now, as we discussed this morning, is another, ethnocide, another potential genocide that, our communities experienced. And when colonialism, destroys a people and their culture so intently, it takes a long, long time to recover.
What have been the effects in your own life as a Native American?
Well, mostly I guess there's identity issues and where do I belong types of issues. So I'm mixed blood, and for different people, their experiences are different, but we have within our communities a very high rate of mortality, a lot of youth suicide, drug use, diabetes. A lot of the physical symptoms have come from just the stress. There still hasn't been an acceptance, a forgiveness, ability to kind of unite as potential Americans, but and I'm not sure. That's not really the goal of ours to heal that, but it's really to help empower our relatives to find their way through their own experiences and the burdens that they're carrying.
When you talk about historical trauma, in a sense, it seems to parallel to me, say, from my experience as an African American, that erasure of culture and identity, and to understand my own story as that of slavery and oppression and an erasing of my own culture, in a sense. And most people don't think of trauma as something that happens inside the body or something that happens inside your own identity. But does this seek to sort of address trauma in a way that kind of doesn't necessarily affect people that are Caucasian, in a sense? They may not understand this. I think even the notion of trauma being locked inside of your body is something that is fairly new to even the medical field.
Well, biologically speaking, it doesn't matter what color our skin is, where our biology still works the same. So when I was an egg in my mother's womb, she was in her mother's womb, right? And not just simply the genetic inheritance, but what we call the epigenetic inheritance. So if your genes are like the train that carries information about how your body's going to look and certain, predispositions that you might have to disease or health, along top of that train, what that train carries, its payload is epigenetics. And the epigenetics are the loyalties, the beliefs, the emotions, the relationships, all sorts of creative or artistic abilities. So epigenetics is really a stronger kind of predictor of stress levels than genetics. And so what was my grandmother experiencing when my mother was in her womb? Because if a woman is born with all her eggs, then I had to be an egg in my mother when she was in her mother's womb. And so right there, we look at a scientifically, biologically true, intergenerational dynamic. I mean, it's pretty simple. So if most people would just look to what their grandmother was experiencing, that was their first relationship to biological life. And what grandma was going through, what her experiences were, her emotional state, the stressors that she dealt with, all compound and get passed forward. And, that's one way of looking at it.
So we're talking with Dr. Ruby Gibson, author, teacher, gifted healer, and executive director of Freedom Lodge, the Black Hills Historical Trauma Research and Recovery Center. And I'm curious about that recovery part. Because if we research and dwell only in the trauma, do we ever find a way out of it? I'm guessing the answer is no. And that's why recovery and native wellness is so important to you.
Well, the answer is actually yes. So we do, the recovery modalities that we've created help us to look intergenerationally. So in our traditional ways, we look back 7 generations, and we believe that we hold 7 generations of memory in our body, and that what we do today influences 7 generations forward. So we stand at this bridge between 14 generations, and we have a huge amount of influence. What we do today is going to impact our children's children's children. So it's one thing to talk about trauma and get ourselves into recovery, and sometimes those recovery techniques are good. Sometimes they're strong, sometimes they're dynamic, but sometimes they're medication. And a lot of our community members become addicted to anti-anxiety or depressive drugs, or then on the list down, opiates and meth and other things. And I really think that SSRI drugs, which are the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, a big word, but it's those are really the gateway drugs, because we give the IHS, Indian Health Services, and it's really common for our younger people to be taking those anti-anxiety and antidepressant drugs at a very young age, when they really shouldn't be given to someone who still has a developing brain.
I find this really interesting, because it used to be that post-traumatic stress disorder was at first not even sort of acknowledged. It was called shell shock, and people will get over it. And lately, what's been going on in the VA is they've started to move towards practices of Buddhism in order to heal people. They're, moving away from, as you said, SSI, and into finding a place within a person to be able to heal themselves and to be able to cope in a way that is more natural. And so this seems to be something like that, but something also entirely different.
Right. So while many people think that our body's simply designed to carry our head around and we can solve everything upstairs, it's really our body that's the keeper of those memories and the place where we can create change. And so that's the term somatic archaeology, somatic referring to the body, and archaeology to our ability to excavate within us those memories that have gone unconscious or subconscious that continue to fuel certain patterns of behavior. And this has been my life's work, and I have seen dynamic changes. We're in the process of a historical trauma masterclass. So we train Indigenous women who are counselors how to use these skills in their community. And I just left a training, and they were like, this stuff is amazing. It saves my life, and it's not hard, and you don't have to use drugs. So part of the essence of it is, can we reclaim our own sovereignty, and can we reclaim the sovereignty of our wellness, of our own health, without having to give that away to, Western models of medicine.
So in September 12th to 15th, you have a 3-day event, Body and Earth, the Future of Native Wellness. You're bringing all of this together and a great group of people to investigate it.
Yes. So as we began working and really taking this our work nationally, we found that there were other people who were interested in Native wellness, not necessarily to dismiss the trauma, but as a way of standing there saying, let's go this direction, let's move toward wellness. It's good for us and it's good for the next generations. They need something to hold on to. So we have some dynamic speakers who have spent their lives focused on wellness and generating ideas and ways to get out from underneath the burdens of the patterning that has been established through residential boarding schools, through relocation, through just the racism of
Right.
being a brown-skinned person in the United States right now.
It's one of those things that's, in a sense, really difficult to, I would imagine, get past, because it's something that you're in society we're really not quite yet allowed to acknowledge, that racism not just happened but continues to happen and continues to be the cycle of our generations. And like you say, how us now, we're going to affect this generation 7 generations away from us. If we don't create a new story, and this is in your book, if we don't find ourselves to be the generation that stops that cycle and creates a new cycle, then we leave it to another generation to do it.
Mm-hmm. And we're doing it again down on our southern border, separating parents and their children, which is part of the historical trauma of Native Americans.
Right. Very similar what's happening. The residential boarding schools that Native children were forced into by the government, that were church run and government funded, created a lot of devastation in our communities. There was high rates of sexual abuse, physical abuse, loss of language, loss of spirituality, loss of how you look, your culture. And they're really doing a lot of the same things. Separating the children from their parents is one of the primary ways that genocide is established. And, those children are being sexually abused. They're being colonized. They're being taken, their language is being taken. It's just astounding. But I think people are looking at it in a different light because we have journalists like yourselves. I'm pro-journalism here, just to put a shout out.
Uh-huh.
And we have the World Wide Web. So people can see what's going on and they can raise alarm. Where back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people couldn't really see what was going on.
Ramona Emerson, thank you so much for giving some time. You're going to be part of the Body and Earth workshop in September, and we're so pleased to be able to talk to you a bit about what you'll be contributing as a Dene writer and a filmmaker and so much more. Thanks for talking with us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We're talking about this notion of historical trauma and recovery, and we're curious about how it relates to not only your own life, but your work.
Well, I think for me, a big part of recovering and talking about trauma and recovering from it has to do with really elevating Indigenous voices. So for me, that's always been a passion. It's why I began writing. It's why I began doing film, because I would always see outsiders making films about us, making films that kind of lingered on our poverty or lingered on our issues, our problems, without making any resolution, but just kind of making it look like we are the we are the gaze. We are that thing they look at. It was kind of disturbing to me. And, all the stereotypical things in the films and all of this that I would grow up watching. And I just knew that it was time to make a change. And so in my work, I really strive to give audiences positive images of our people, show that we're resilient, show that we're powerful, show that we have a voice. And for me, that's the one way I think that we are going to escape, like the grips of trauma, the grips of colonization. All of that has to do with how we look at ourselves and how we see ourselves, and how we see, how we are able to see ourselves on the screen is really important. So I think that's what I'm bringing to the Earth and Body Conference, is this idea of self-reliance, this idea of self-empowerment, and using that to create power within our communities, using that to create a new voice for our communities, using that to empower ourselves, using it to empower our people, using it to make change in our communities. And so that's kind of where I'm going as far as the Earth and Body Conference. And we're going to be showing our film, The Mayors of Shiprock, there. And the Mayors of Shiprock, I think, is like my 8th film. But it follows a group of young Navajo leaders in Shiprock, New Mexico, who take it upon themselves to make change within their community. So we're going to be bringing the film there, and and discussing with everyone this whole idea of community engagement and how to harness your voice and how to harness your inner power and make change, and be that change that you want to see. I think is really the important takeaway from that.
Ramona, we just moments ago talked about how changing narrative is extremely important in the community of Native American people. As you so well stated, all of the ways that we understand Native Americans as a whole is through the images that we've seen throughout our history, our short history in this country, and perhaps that's how Native Americans see themselves as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, how does this relate to, in a sense, recovery to change this narrative, I suppose?
I think that as we progress as filmmakers and writers, I just see this huge surge coming up of Indigenous people reclaiming their voice. And reclaiming their ability to speak for themselves, reclaiming their ability to speak about the trauma that we've lived through, to speak and tackle those issues directly. And a lot of it has been through traditional ways that we've had colonized out of us. Instead, reclaiming that identity, reclaiming those sacred spaces and those the sacred knowledge that so many of us have forgotten, and pass that strength and that reclamation onto the next generation of people.
Dr. Rube, if we're to try to look at wellness in a sense of discovering our authentic selves, unearthing our truth, in a sense, racism has removed a person from their authentic self, and that is in itself is a removal of wellness.
That's right. And we're giving voice. That's really what our conference is about, is to give voice to people who have something like Ramona's speaking about, something important to say. We need to collaborate and come together and be able to articulate some of those things that we haven't been able to articulate out in the larger community. This is mostly a gathering of Native Americans, but of course anyone is welcome. But that's the dialogue, is can we be bold enough to be able to finally break through those chains?
Yeah, I'm looking at your book and I'm thinking, a few things that I read, like remember your story, heal your story, and how we are simultaneously making this is a quote in your book, right now you are simultaneously making stories in history. You are living and breathing within the blueprint of your ancestors and modifying it with each choice and each action you take. I found that passage really moving.
Yes, I also just want to add to this that, as we work through some of the things Ramona's talking about and that I've been sharing, I believe that buried within us are still those memories that are true, that are beautiful, the memories of being coherent as a community, of being able to be vital and to remember, how we lived and really the foundations of our people and our traditions. That those memories still live inside of us, but they get covered up with all these other layers of stress and experience and poverty and do I belong? Can I have a voice? All these insecurities. And as we do this kind of work, we find that we deepen and deepen into being able to access that core inside of us. And people like Ramona, have accessed that and are giving it a voice. And that's how we become strong as a community. We can't think our way out of fear, but we can feel our way out and we can act our way out, because those survivalistic tendencies were very necessary to get by. But it's just time for a change. It's time for us to get off the trauma road and get on the wellness road. And that's where we're going. And I know it's might not be what everybody thinks, but we have to start somewhere.
That was Dr. Ruby Gibson and Ramona Emerson of Real Indian Films. Both of them will be at the Body and Earth Conference in September in Minnesota, and we really wanted to share that with you. I think it's a fascinating look at how to connect body and earth again. Coming up at 7, Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez on the program. 73 years after the U.S. dropped atom bombs on Nagasaki, survivors warn about the threat of nuclear warfare today.
And then stick around and tune in and drop out with DJ Mike for Thursday Night Psych Out at 8 o'clock. And then Gianni with Dirty Boulevard at 10:30. And of course, you can always start a brand new day with John Florence.
Next up, we're back in the studio with Lyla June, a Dene musician, poet, community organizer, hip-hop artist. Let's get right into it.
So we were talking about the Body Earth Conference, and I think, Ruby, one thing we haven't talked about is how in Native American culture, body and earth are synonymous. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
As first peoples of this land and this continent here on Mother Earth, we, most indigenous people consider themselves caretakers. And what happens to the earth happens to our body. What happens to our body happens to the earth. And with the crisis that's going on in the rape and the destruction of Mother Earth, it's being experienced through the people as well. And we can't really take that out of the equation. If we're talking about recovery and we're talking about healing, we have to include that co-part, because we consider it as part of all of our relations in the animal world, our relations in the human world, our relations in the plant world, in the mineral world. It's part of one big circle of life. And so we can't say, oh, I as a human am more important, I'm going to recover, forget about the rest of it, right? We have to consider the entire circle of life if we're really talking about a concept of wellness. And that's the emphasis of our conference, and one of the reasons we brought Lyla June in.
Lyla, what are your thoughts on that concept of body and earth as one?
Well, it's not only a metaphor, but it's also literal. A lot of indigenous communities and other, I want to say, marginalized communities are targeted for the waste of different contaminating energy sources. So we're basically the dumping grounds for a lot of things. Actually, the whole country is debating if they should store all their nuclear waste in New Mexico right now, where I'm from. And so it's also a literal thing where a lot of these communities are sacrificed for the rest of the world. And so it seems like any contaminants that go into the water go into our body. Any contaminants that go into the soil go into our food, which goes into our body. Any contaminants we put into the sky, we breathe in. And so in that sense, it's very literal as well. Like what happens to the earth happens to our bodies. And I think people can hide out from that for so long and pretend like they're not a part of this intricate web of everything. But it has to ultimately come back around and hit you, because at the end of the day, we are all connected. And so this whole idea of like some communities will be sacrifice zones and the rest of us who are more rich and more of a higher class, we can be safe, that lie is slowly coming apart. And we're realizing that no matter what we do, if we harm the earth, it will eventually come back on us or our children. And that's what global warming is. It's more of a global expression of this contamination of the earth, and it's going to affect everyone.
Lyla June, we would love to include some of your music or poetry in this interview when we go to post-production. And we'd love to have you set up a song or a poem and share that with us.
Absolutely. Do you want me to read it now, or would you like me to send you files?
Let's do both.
Okay, cool. This is a poem called Creator is the Water. And it's just a dance with creation and acknowledging how we are held by this creator, which to me is epitomized by water. Okay. When I close my eyes at night, I can feel the rock being cut open by water. I hear a grandfather's song, and it sounds like sand walking down the river bottom. In this song, they talk about how even the mighty canyon walls were carved by meandering streams. Beneath the gentle waters, there are people, not people like you and I, stone people. When I close my eyes at night, I am one of them, and Creator is the water. Over a lifetime, she teaches me about patience and commitment. She teaches me in her trickle language about being gentle yet persistent. And in her language of bubbles, she speaks to me and she says, journeys, take them, but try not to forget who you are along the way. I have nothing for you but these words, so place them in your pocket and go on your journey, and I will meet you again at the ocean's throne when you become 1 million kernels of sand. Her voice hums in my blood, quiet as a stream in the night. And it is this song about how we are all so loved. The eagles dip their talons into her soft body and pull from it a fish, a flesh meal for their children. They sing this grandfather song with her, and it sounds like feathers cutting into the sky. And it is a song about how even hatred surrenders to wonder. She's breaking my heart apart like a stubborn granite puzzle of problems, and even the hardest doubts and sorrows and self-hatred give way to her infinite grace. And who knew that sometimes grace can come from standing in a raging river until it takes away everything you think you own, all the shame and all the blame, takes it away and replaces it with a weightlessness so profound that you can't not cry, tears of absolute praise, and run all around the riverbanks, shouting to the cattails and the minnows and the willows about the truth of beauty, about the truth of a creator that breathes through the trees, truth of a creator that weaves winter from water and night, truth of a creator that weaves bodies from dust and light, and carries us down the river of life, over and over and over, until we finally understand the meaning of forever, forever. In the language of the stones, there is no word for regret, only the complete understanding of what it means to be a beloved son or daughter. We are the rocks, and Creator, she is the water.
That was beautiful. Billy's giving you snaps.
Thank you.
So, what are you going to talk about at the conference in September, Lyla June?
I'm going to talk about, well, pretty much what we're talking about right now, how we can heal the earth if we can heal humanity. And we can heal humanity if we can heal women. Because men are healed as women are healed. And really drawing the links between rape culture and resource extraction culture and capitalism. And how the way we view the earth is oftentimes the way we view women. If the earth is just an object to be bought and sold, oftentimes women are seen as objects to be owned or thrown away. If we see the earth as a spiritless thing, then oftentimes we don't recognize that women have a voice and that they have needs and feelings. And if men base their worth on how much property they own, how much real estate they have, how much earth they can control, they oftentimes also judge themselves and their worth based on how many women they can sleep with or how many women they've been with or what kind of woman they're with. So it's very much a linkage. Whereas if you see the earth as a living, breathing being who not deserves but just naturally you would give it respect, then oftentimes we feel the same for women.
Fertility, the ability to birth life, whether as a woman or as Mother Earth. Billy's mind just was blown, as mine as well. I understand you're also a rapper.
Yes, I am. I like to think I am, at least.
So we'd love to hear one of your songs because we understand you're a rapper. How about All Nations Rise?
Sounds great.
Tell us about that first before we play it.
So All Nations Rise was written right before Standing Rock kind of popped off. The goal was to bring hope and inspiration to Indigenous peoples and kind of like a manifesto say, we're not going to hide anymore.
Shine your light, we are equal. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Get ready for the glorious comeback of our people. Oh, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up. All nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's the time. All nations rise. Rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's the time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull them back and let go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope. Yeah, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to my marrow, I will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah, I resurrect. Yes, you can bet that we seen the single mama raising children on the res. We seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We seen the children take their lives when they can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. Can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war. No, we can't take the dread anymore. It's a war, but we've seen it all before. And now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. We are the ones Grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I can feel it in my heart. Can you feel it in your blood? I can hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up, wake up. Pueblo hermoso, levántense, es nuestro tiempo. No tienes que esconderte más. Ahora es nuestro tiempo.
Mujer indígena, tú eres tan sagrada. Traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, respetamos tus ancestros y la suya cultura. Hombre indígena, tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive a pesar del abuso.
Lyla June, thank you so much for giving us some time today and sharing your poetry and your music.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure, and I'm really honored to work with Dr. Ruby Gibson for the Body and Earth Conference, and I'm sure it's going to be quite special and plant a lot of beautiful seeds for a lot of beautiful change.
That's Lyla June, one of the many speakers and presenters at the upcoming Body and Earth Conference in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It starts September 12th. Where can people get more information and learn about what is going to be offered there, Dr. Gibson?
They can go to our website. Probably most importantly, would have the most information. It's Body and Earth, earth.org. And on that website, you can see a list of all the presenters and read their bios. You can see our schedule. You can also see that there are links for if you want to be a vendor or if you want to provide some sponsorship or get a reservation at the Mystic Lake Casino Hotel, which is where the conference is being held, just south of Minneapolis on the Shakopee Nation Reservation. And so you can go there and read more. I also wanted to say that we're accepting scholarship applications for tribal college students. It's really important for us to not turn anyone away because they can't afford to attend. In particular, our younger generation, who so needs this information and is hungry for change, much like Lyla's passion and spontaneity. You know, we're looking to call in other young people who want to get on board and start, creating some vision together. This is about having a conversation. So if you are a college-enrolled student and you're a tribal member, you can attend the conference for free. You can go to freedomlodge.org. That's our website of our nonprofit group. And we'll be happy to send you an application. Those would be due by August 22nd. We also have been providing some scholarships for elders who are unable to afford the conference fee. So you can also reach out the same place. Anyways, that's pretty much our...
Thank you so much for giving us some time today and talking about this historic trauma and recovery. And that's what you'll be talking about as well at the conference. I see it's generational brain spotting and the neurophysiology of stress. So I have just got to know, before you go, I've just got to know, what is generational brain spotting?
So brain spotting is a technique that was developed by Dr. David Grand. And, it's about using eye position. So if we understand that our eyes are the extension of our nervous system, and maybe I'm feeling anxiety inside somewhere, and I find an eye position that correlates to that sensation of anxiety, and I let my eyes linger there. Where our eyes go, that energy goes, whatever the anxiety or the emotion that's underneath, right? Because for every physical symptom, there's an emotional counterpart. And when we can move that emotion through, then typically the physical symptom goes away. It's a very powerful technique and it's very simple. And I have helped people who've been in chronic pain for years in 1 hour completely rid themselves of that pain. It's not because there's magic involved. It's simply because our neurophysiology is always looking to complete experiences and to bring things up and release them. So as you use this eye position, and we incorporate the techniques of somatic archaeology, it allows someone to go deeper and deeper within themselves and pull up those memories that they may be holding that or harboring that are causing distress or addiction or relational issues or self-worth issues, and help them to process it through. So it's a beautiful technique, and it's something we've been using in our community, and it's been really, really successful. So, and it's something you can do on your own too. We call it gaze spotting, where you can actually resource and ground yourself if you're having a particularly difficult day or you're experiencing rage or anger. And, I think it's one of the things that we use that can be, like I said, techniques that allow us to be treating ourselves without drugs, without medicine, and still experiencing, greater way of health or looking toward wellness. So I'm excited to share that with the community. As an organization, we're looking to create a diabetes research project using brain spotting, because the biogenealogy of diabetes has to do with the traumas that are experienced in the past.
Really something. You're a different kind of therapist. If you ask me, I've gone through post-traumatic stress disorder therapy and did it for years, EMDR and rapid eye movement types of therapy. But it's intended that you go to a therapist and you do this work, and you don't want to do this work outside of being in that space. And your approach is giving people tools to heal themselves as they move through their own life.
That's right, because we know if we just break trauma down to its most simplest form, it's a loss of voice, choice, and power. That's when trauma happens. And so the reclamation of voice, choice, and power is what heals trauma. And the empowerment of being able to provide some cure for yourself or for a family member, is just phenomenal. Instead of having to go out and someone else determine what is best for you, that we hold already inside of us an amazing amount of wisdom. We're walking libraries. Our bodies are so full of information, and we rarely go there because the cure lives inside. It doesn't live outside of us. I mean, if we break our leg, yes, we need to go to the doctor, but, there are certain conditions, but I'm saying for general day-to-day wellness. And, you take PTSD and you layer it a whole bunch with like multiple layers of PTSD, and you get historical trauma. And it just doesn't fit into the model of talk therapy. Like I said, you can't talk your way out of it. So by being able to be self-resourcing, it helps us to work through the survivalistic tendencies that have been going on for the past 500 years. Can we live through this? And that's where we are. And we have the medicine that we need, both traditionally and in our modern world. Those ideas have come together. We know more about our brain. We know more about how our body and our physiology work. So when we put those two wisdoms together, we can care for each other. We can create that sovereignty of wellness that we're talking about.
Dr. Ruby Gibson, thank you so much. Anytime you're in Utah, please stop by and talk with us.
Okay. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you for supporting our work, and I hope that your listeners enjoy this conversation.
Wow. Voice, choice, and power.
Dr. Ruby Gibson with some wisdom there. I'm thinking I might need a road trip to the conference. Sounds great. Uh-huh. And Lyla June, the Dene musician, poet, community organizer, hip-hop artist. Man, I love that too.
Really something else, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. So that's going to do it for us. I'm Billy Palmer.
I'm Laura Jones. Democracy Now!
Is next.